Hello, hello. Of course, now we're back to the great, grand old question of, alright, I'm playing Lords Mobile, and I need to know a thing or two. Mainly, I don't have a single clue how to get a ton of gold. If you want a suggestion, I recommend Labyrinth. If you're looking to get a lot of gold, you want to hit Frostwing in Labyrinth. He's the gold sucker. He's the guy who has all the gold. He's willing to give you lots and lots of gold. I don't even care if it's Elite Labyrinth or normal Labyrinth. The guy's always got something to give. Naturally, of course, like, who isn't going to give the guy some gold? I mean, he'll even give you 1,000 or so plus hits. I mean, look at this. The guy's going to give you just a wee bit, not a whole lot, but enough to pay you back just for your fair share of rewards. And you're never gonna lose. I mean, look, I'm not, I'm not doing too bad. There's already 400,000 gold there that I didn't have. 600,000 gold there I didn't have. So the Labyrinth, in my opinion, is the number one way to get gold. If you're having a hard time getting gold, gold is Labyrinth, okay? Now, what about all the other places that I could potentially get resources? And what is the best way to do it? I have, for the longest time, kind of explained to people how to find dead kingdoms, and I've kind of explained how to pick out kingdoms that are probably a little bit more, negatively speaking, a pain in the ass to be in, or dead, or really just pointless. Okay, one of the things, or what I consider to be the number one factor that makes a really good kingdom versus a really bad kingdom, is actually determined by how frequently there are people botting in the game. Now, this is a really, really, really bad problem in this game. It's not often talked about, but I'm willing to talk about it because, frankly, it's a goddamn pandemic in this game. You will find in almost every kingdom, I've been hitting 181, for example, for the longest time. And frankly, the only recipe that makes for a really, really decent, what I call quote-unquote ripe kingdom, okay, is a kingdom in which it's ruled by one guild, has hardly of any competitors, and that means that it might be filled of billion-mite players, but it's all ruled primarily from one guild with a bunch of sister quote-unquote bot guilds. Now, if you don't know what a bot guild is, or even how to spot one, I can tell you how. It's really quite easy. Just to start us out here, you notice this army here, and then you go over here, and you see all these freaking lines. And you're going to yourself like, well, that doesn't look natural. And then you kind of go down and you keep going down. And all of a sudden you start seeing squads and you see hordes. And all of a sudden it all starts to make sense. And bots, while Lords Mobile has been around for, I don't know, since 2016, right? And I've been around for a while, okay? If you want some humble advice, I've been around. I've seen things, okay? It's gotten so bad, though, here recently. But the main thing, when it comes to bots in Lords Mobile, and this is really the key here, is that not every bot hive is what I call perfect, meaning it's open to failure. It is open to failure. Get that? Failure. It can, in fact, quit working. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how the heck are you supposed to, I don't know, quote-unquote, time, how do you know, really? What are you looking for? And like I said, first rule is you got to find an alliance that is predominantly has no competition. It is owned by itself, has no threats, and they have a lot of sister accounts or guilds, and these bots are running 24/7. The next key and most crucial part to make this work is you need to be able to put like an alternate account in the kingdom, okay? And what I do is I'll go around looking at kingdoms with a $5 migration pack every once in a blue moon. And I will look for these kingdoms where the recipe smells for success. Meaning I have one alliance or maybe 2, 3 alliances running the show. A majority of the accounts that they have strewn about are either hived up or they have them strewn about in pods. It's not uncommon to see, say like anything around a general area, but most of the time bots are going to be kind of strewn about in patterns, kind of like this. You notice how There's one right there, one right there, one right there. They're built-in patterns because naturally they're trying to maximize the amount of space that they can gather from. So they keep them close, and all of a sudden there's nothing to gather. So naturally they try to keep them spread apart. That's, makes sense, right? And of course, with that, there's always a time at which eventually they need all those resources to come out. And that is when they eventually show up in guild banks. And then from those guild banks to the players that plan on using them. Hey, pretty simple concept, right? But the thing about ripe kingdoms that makes them so fun is that we want to wait until there's a significant event that would cause players to, every single account in this game has to have shielding. And naturally, when someone unplugs those accounts and takes over them, the bot is no longer in order. And so what you want to look for is reckless, or what I would describe as, basically there's going to be the players that are sitting with their alliance mates, and they're usually in these giant hives thinking that nobody in their right mind would attack them. And conveniently, these are also the same people who have a stupid number of troops sitting in their accounts, waiting for someone to zero them. They're also conveniently, a lot of the time, more often than not, you'll find these giant hives where you will find every once in a blue moon, you'll see a couple of accounts that are just strewn about, and they look like banks. And more often than not, you target player banks is what you end up doing. So, for example, if I look at SMD, they're a pretty fun one to mess with, because if I looked at SMD, even for a few minutes, it's probably mostly positioned by players. But out of that position, you've got local. Those are all basically accounts that somebody, whilst they may be bonding some of those resources, they may not be. They may be actively going in those accounts and going out to gather. There's really no way, and obviously in IGG's position, they're not going to know the difference, right? You can't tell a bot from a player. It really is very difficult for them to tell, apparently. But on the surface of it, right, there's plenty of opportunity for one of these to go off and there's a killing to be made. Now, I've kind of found that, it's not always as systematic as it seems, which means that if you wait for certain strategic periods of time, say during the middle of an event in which you might need to deposit resources, namely feudal, baron, so baron, for example, battle royale is another example. Any event in which you actually need to pour resources out in massive amounts, or anytime they plan on, quote unquote, what a lot of these guilds are doing, or what I suspect a lot of these people are doing, is actually turning around and transferring these resources out to their guild mates, their guild allies, or they may be outright selling them, who knows. But the main thing being is that there's always going to be a point at which these accounts need to be moved. And what I like to strike on is I look for accounts and groups of accounts that look like they could be forgotten about, or someone might slip. And so you poke around and you kind of want to pay attention to what those accounts are, kind of pick up on, which ones are banks, which ones are being used as basically hives and gathers, and then just kind of follow along and see where they're mostly being used at. Because more often than not, what I'll usually end up finding is there'll be this 1 billion mine account sitting by a 400 or 500 mil account, and they forgot to shield their 400 to 500 mil account. Sounds stupid, but you'd be surprised how often I find that. And that 400 to 500 mil mine account also happens to have a few billion resources sitting on it. And naturally, if someone forgets to do that in a kingdom where they have no predators, no threats, nobody targeting them, and they don't know any better, and they've never had anybody rally them, nobody ever solo them, they've never had a threat, chances are the likelihood that you actually get something good is going to go up a fair amount. Now, finding right kingdoms in that nature is just really hard. It's really rare. I don't see it as often. But I love those kind of, in those circumstances, they almost always triple up on the premise that you're going to find bot accounts and you're going to take advantage of them. The problem is that it used to be a lot easier to accomplish. Now, I say that because every time there was a maintenance back in the old days, it was actually significant enough that it would actually cause the bot to quit running, because essentially it wouldn't relog back in. Naturally, the only way those accounts would ever log back in is if someone went in there and manually went and logged them back out and logged them back in. Now the problem with that is now they've gotten it to a point now where, it can tell the difference between whether it's on or it's off, or even now it's gotten so bad to the point where now there are players out there now, evidently, okay, and this is what's kind of yeah, you can get an earful of it, okay, but there's a lot of this going on where people are experiencing issues where, okay, you could be shielded for day in, day out, every single day. Then the one day you unshield, all of a sudden, hey, everybody and their dog knows that you're unshielded and they're out to get your butt. Like, wasn't always that way. That's not some accident either. It's due in part because of tracking bots now. And it's really kind of ridiculous because, for a while there was things like Lord's mobile maps, Goodnight bots, these bot accounts and the botting industry in this game is actually pretty freaking significant. It's become part of the game. In the span of, I think, 2 or 3 years, I've watched this game basically have no bots, and now it's everywhere. You find it in almost every kingdom. It is prevalent in every place that you look. And the only successful guilds out in the game are in some way, shape, or form have bot guilds in some way funneling resources for them. And only in some rare cases where do you find they are actually then going one step further, is using tracking bots to eliminate their competition. So is botting getting any better? And you might be thinking, surely that is the case, but all I can say is, at least on the surface of it, is that according to the Steam charts, it doesn't look like the game's getting any more popular, at least not on Steam. I don't know what that says about the entire game in its in the grand scheme of things. That could be a bad thing. Could be a really bad thing, because naturally, like anything, if you don't address a problem and nobody does anything about it, and it continues to go on like this, how much longer is it until eventually it gets to a point where it's too much? Eventually the average player will get kind of tired of it. Or especially the guilds out there that are fighting amongst themselves. I can't imagine why you would not find that incredibly annoying. But yet, here we are. That said, with Rape Kingdoms, the main recipe that I'm looking for right now are those 3 things. I'm looking for bot guilds, I'm looking for 1 or 2, maybe 3 major alliances, and I'm looking, more importantly, for little to no competition. No threat, no constant threat that you're going to get yourself raided. If you're not going to get raided, chances are people get sloppy, and naturally you'll be able to get resources. Now, with all that said, I hope that was at least a little bit insightful about finding Rape Kingdoms. Feel free to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you to the next video.